In the silent blackness between the stars, a single message traveled, faint, broken, and full of static. It came from the edge of known space, where the Earth Alliance had sent one of its most peaceful vessels, the medical frigate Solace. Her crew of doctors, nurses, and volunteers had no weapons. Their mission was simple: save anyone they could, human or alien, friend or foe. They were known across systems for their white hull and the Red Cross painted along its sides. No one ever fired on a medical ship, not even in the darkest wars. Until now, when the signal reached the Earth Alliance Relay Station 92, deep in orbit around Titan, the technicians at first thought it was debris interference. But as the audio cleared, they froze. "This is Captain Rhea Lawson of the Earth Medical Frigate Solace. We are under attack. I repeat, under attack. No provocation, no warning." Static tore through the recording. Then came screaming, alarms, and the deep sound of metal tearing. The technician leaned closer, whispering, "Who would attack a medical ship?" The last seconds of the transmission were quiet, then a soft voice, trembling. "To any who hear this, tell Ith they fired first." Then silence. The technician's hand shook as he sent the transmission to Earth Command. He didn't know it yet, but he had just awakened the darkest side of humanity, the one that slept until it was called to war. On Earth, in the city of Geneva, the Terran Council chamber filled with heavy silence. The holographic display showed the wreck of Solace, twisted metal floating among the stars, its red cross half burned away. Dozens of diplomats sat frozen. Journalists outside shouted questions through glass walls. At the head of the chamber stood Admiral Mara Vance, commander of the 3rd Terran Fleet. Her face was pale but calm, her hands locked behind her back. "They knew it was medical," she said quietly. "The IFF beacon was broadcasting the medical code. This wasn't a mistake." A councilman muttered, "Who did it?" Vance's eyes narrowed. "The Raoul Dominion. Their warships were seen in the same sector 2 hours before the attack." The name spread through the room like poison. The Raoul, proud, cold-blooded, reptilian beings from the storm worlds beyond the rim, had long viewed humanity as newcomers to the stars. They tolerated trade, mocked diplomacy, and secretly despised Earth's talk of peace. But never before had they dared to cross such a line. News of the attack hit Earth like a shockwave. Every screen, every feed, every home played the final moments of the Solace. The people watched the burning hull drift through space, the screams, the static, and finally the Red Cross vanishing into darkness. In New York, crowds gathered at dawn under the giant memorial wall for fallen explorers. Someone placed a white flower beneath it, whispering, "For the healers." In Tokyo, students paused their lessons to watch the broadcast. In Nairobi, a doctor stood in silence, tears in her eyes. And across the colonies, from Mars to Europa, miners, soldiers, and civilians all felt the same cold anger building. Earth had lost billions in wars before, but this was different. This wasn't battle. This was murder. The Terran Council met again in emergency session. The room buzzed with diplomats arguing, some for restraint, some for war. Admiral Vance stood motionless as the voices rose around her. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady as steel. "When we entered the stars, we promised the galaxy that humanity had changed, that we were no longer the monsters of our past. We built hospitals instead of battleships, colonies instead of prisons. The Solace was the proof of that promise." She turned toward the council, her blue eyes cold. "The Raoul have shattered that promise. They fired on mercy itself." The room fell silent. Vance stepped forward, her boots echoing across the floor. "If we do nothing, every pirate, every tyrant, every empire will see this and think we've grown soft. We haven't. We've only been patient. The 3rd Fleet is ready. Let us show them what patience looks like when it ends." The chamber lights dimmed. A holographic image filled the air, a massive fleet rising from Earth orbit, black and silent, marked only by a single emblem, a red cross, glowing like a wound against steel. The council voted. The decision was unanimous. Operation Iron Mercy was approved. Hours later, in the Terran Command Center, Admiral Vance stood before her officers. The entire room hummed with quiet tension. No cheering, no speeches. Only grim faces and clenched fists. Vance looked up at the massive display showing the wreckage of the Solace. That ship carried our best. Doctors, volunteers, people who saved lives even in enemy territory. They didn't wear armor. They wore compassion. And they were slaughtered. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The Raal think humanity is gentle. That we're healers. That we've forgotten what we used to be. She turned, her gaze sweeping across the command room. Let's remind them. Launch the fleet. Far above Earth, the hangars of the Terran dreadnought Resolution opened, revealing rows of black starships, each one armed, silent, and ready. Engines flared blue as they rose toward the stars. Across the planet, people watched the launch live. No one celebrated. No one smiled. They just watched, knowing that something terrible was waking again. As the fleet vanished into the dark, an old phrase began spreading across the networks, first whispered, then spoken aloud. They fired on a medical ship. The words carried through homes, stations, and colonies until they became a vow, one the galaxy would never forget. They fired on a medical ship. Now they'll meet Earth's real monsters. The Raal Dominion had always believed themselves untouchable. From their capital world, Kareth Prime, their rulers looked down upon the galaxy like gods watching insects. They were old, proud, and powerful, and above all, convinced that fear was the only true law of the stars. When word reached the Raal High Command that they had destroyed an Earth medical ship, no one flinched. In fact, some laughed. Inside the Grand Chamber, a curved hall lined with scales of polished obsidian, General Takavern stood tall before the throne of the Dominion Chancellor. His armor gleamed red and silver, the colors of conquest. The humans cry over one ship, Takas said, voice echoing through the chamber. One ship of doctors. Pathetic. The Chancellor, a massive creature with deep golden scales, leaned forward. And their response? Takas smirked. None yet, Chancellor. They send words, not warships. They always hide behind peace. The Chancellor's claws tapped the armrest. Good. Let them whine to their councils. Let them send their diplomats. The Raal Dominion does not fear healers. The generals around the room hissed in laughter. But one stayed silent. Commander Sirathal, a younger strategist with dark green scales and sharp, cautious eyes. She spoke carefully, her voice low. General, Chancellor, with respect, the humans are not as weak as they appear. Their fleet is smaller, yes, but efficient. And their soldiers, the ones they call Marines, have a record unmatched in close combat. Taka growled. Old myths. They bleed like all others. Sira's gaze didn't waver. Perhaps. But when they bleed, they remember. Her words hung in the air for a moment before the laughter returned. 2 days later, deep in Raal-controlled space, the first reports came in. A patrol fleet along the outer spine vanished without a trace. No distress calls, no debris, nothing but silence. At first, the Raal believed it was a technical failure. But then came the second loss. And the third. An entire carrier group had disappeared. Sensors picked up faint energy readings, human frequencies. General Taka slammed his fist on the control table. They dare enter Raal space. With what? A handful of ships. A technician's voice shook as he replied, Not a handful, sir. A full Terran strike group. Black holes. No transponders. No communication. Taka sneered. Cowards hiding in the dark. But deep down, Sirathal's warning echoed in his mind. Meanwhile, in the black between the stars, the Terran fleet moved like a shadow. The ships were silent, engines muted, communications dark. Their hulls reflected nothing, only the cold light of distant suns. At the heart of the fleet, aboard the dreadnought Resolution, Admiral Mara Vance stood before a wide viewing screen. Beyond the glass stretched the Raal sector, thousands of worlds, millions of lives, and somewhere within them, the ones who had fired on Solace. Vance didn't blink. We don't strike their civilians. We don't destroy their cities, she said quietly to her officers. We target only the ones who gave the order. That's justice. That's iron mercy. Her first officer, Commander Hayes, looked uneasy. The Raal think we're weak. They won't surrender. Vance's tone was cold. Then we teach them why peace was their best choice. The first engagement came near Vorga Station, a Raal shipyard orbiting a barren moon. The Raal defenders never saw them coming. Out of the darkness, Terran ships decloaked, not stealth by technology, but by silence. No lights, no signals, only movement. The Terran destroyer Halberd fired first, a precision EMP strike that crippled the Raal defense grid. Then came the boarding pods, streaking across space like falling stars. Within minutes, the Raal station went dark. No explosion, no mass killing, only silence. When the Raal reinforcements arrived, they found their shipyard stripped of weapons, their commanders missing, and a message carved into the metal of the docking bay. Mercy denied. Mercy revoked. Back on Kareth Prime, chaos erupted. General Tacker threw the report across the table. This is madness. How can they move so fast? Sirathal studied the data calmly. They are not attacking our borders. They are targeting leadership, communications, supply. They are cutting the Dominion's heart. The Chancellor growled. Then crush them. Send the 8th Legion. Sira frowned. If we respond without planning, we'll lose more than ships. We'll lose control. Tacker barked. Are you suggesting fear? Her eyes flashed. No, General. I'm suggesting intelligence. They warned us once, and we laughed. The chamber fell silent. Across the galaxy, neutral worlds watched the conflict unfold. News of the Solace attack spread through every channel, accompanied by images of Terran ships moving with ghost-like precision. Some called it vengeance. Others called it justice. But all agreed on one thing. The humans were no longer the quiet healers they once pretended to be. The Raal media mocked Earth, calling their fleet the army of doctors. But when the first Raal colony vanished without a battle, its military outposts wiped clean, civilians unharmed, that laughter stopped. Messages from survivors described the same thing. Black ships, red insignia, voices speaking calm, measured words before the strike. One transmission, cut off halfway, carried a chilling whisper. They don't fight for territory. They fight for memory. On the bridge of the Resolution, Admiral Vance received the intercepted Raal broadcast. She said nothing for a long time. Finally, she turned to her crew. They call us monsters, she said softly. They are right, but only when Mercy dies. Her fleet's engines flared blue once more, cutting across the stars toward Kareth Prime. The Raal had made their mistake. Now, the humans were coming, not as healers, not as diplomats, but as the very monsters the galaxy had tried so hard to forget. The Terran fleet moved without a sound. Hundreds of black warships, their hulls painted matte to swallow starlight, slipped through the void like ghosts. No music, no chatter, only the quiet hum of reactors and the steady pulse of mission data scrolling across dimly lit screens. Each ship bore the same crimson symbol, a small cross surrounded by a ring of steel. It was once the mark of healing. Now, it had become the mark of judgment. On the bridge of the TSS Resolution, Admiral Mara Vance stood beside the navigation console, watching the holographic star map unfold. Tiny red points marked Raal installations. Each flickered, then faded, as strike teams moved in and wiped them clean. Her second-in-command, Commander Hayes, broke the silence. They don't know what's coming, Admiral. Not really. Vance's voice was cold but calm. They knew enough to target a hospital ship. They'll learn the rest soon. She glanced toward the communications officer. Any reply from the Raal government? None. Their diplomats are silent. Only their generals speak. Threats, mostly. Vance nodded once. Then we'll let our actions speak louder. In Raal space, terror spread faster than light. Every day, another station went dark. Another fleet vanished. No one knew how the humans moved so fast, or where they would strike next. Reports described strange tactics. Instead of massive invasions, small Terran task forces appeared without warning, striking with surgical precision, crippling war factories, command outposts, and fuel depots. They didn't destroy cities. They didn't kill civilians. But every target that had anything to do with the Solace's attack disappeared. Raoul generals called it cowardice, shadow war. But soldiers on the ground called it something else. They called it hunting. On a barren moon called Chorus 7, a Raoul garrison of 5,000 soldiers stood guard over a supply base. They were trained warriors, proud and ruthless. They had heard rumors about humans, but few believed them. Then, in the middle of the night cycle, their senses went dark. At first, they thought it was a malfunction. Then came the low hum, a vibration felt through the ground, followed by silence so heavy it made the air thick. A soldier looked out from the watchtower and froze. Shapes, tall, armored, and silent, moved across the plain, reflecting nothing, giving off no light. He shouted an alarm. The base came alive with noise and panic. But by the time the sirens finished screaming, the shapes were already inside. Terran Marines. They didn't roar. They didn't care. They moved like machines with purpose. Each step precise. Each shot clean. The Raoul fired desperately, but the humans didn't fall. Even when hit, they kept advancing, cold eyes glowing behind dark visors. Within 20 minutes, it was over. The base's power plant was gone, its command post reduced to dust. The surviving Raoul soldiers were rounded up and left alive, shaken but breathing. Before they were abandoned, the humans left a message burned into the sand. For Solace. Hours later, that same message echoed through Raoul military channels. Videos from Cora 7 spread across the Dominion. Soldiers whispered that the humans didn't fight for land or glory. They fought for memory, for vengeance, for the dead. On Kareth Prime, panic began to replace arrogance. General Taka Vern slammed his claws on a command table. They're using Fey. Psychological warfare. Commander Sirathal watched the footage quietly. No, General. They're using precision. They are reminding us what happens when we cross their line. Taka snarled. They think they can intimidate us. Sira turned toward him, her voice low and even. They already have. Meanwhile, the Terran fleet gathered at the edge of the Raoul core worlds. Admiral Vance watched as fleet formations aligned across the screen. Destroyers in the front, carriers behind, medships at the rear. Each vessel's medical crews prepared to receive Raoul wounded, a detail that made her officers pause. Commander Hayes frowned. We're still taking prisoners, Admiral. Yes, she said simply. We're not them. He nodded but didn't speak again. The fleet was now officially entering Phase 2 of Operation Iron Mercy. Its new target, the Raoul Central War Command. In the command briefing, Vance's voice carried through the room like steel. Listen carefully. We strike their command systems. We end this cleanly. No civilian loss. No chaos. An officer asked quietly, if they resist. Vance looked up. Then we remind them that monsters don't beg for permission. The room fell silent. When the attack began, the stars themselves seemed to vanish. Dozens of Terran ships dropped out of FTL around Raoul Command Nexus Theta, a fortress station orbiting a gas giant. Raoul defenses opened fire instantly, beams of orange plasma cutting through the void. But the humans didn't break formation. Their counterfire came as streaks of white light, not random volleys, but exact, hot-shot bursts. Every round hit command relays, weapon batteries, and shield generators. Within 10 minutes, the massive station was crippled. Terran Marines boarded it. Not to kill, to gather evidence. They found command orders confirming the Solace attack had been deliberate. The Raoul had known. Admiral Vance read the report in silence. Then she looked up. Transmit it to the galaxy, she ordered. Let them see who the real monsters are. Across thousands of systems, the footage spread. Raoul commanders laughing as they ordered the destruction of a marked medical ship. The galaxy reacted with shock, disgust, and fear. The humans hadn't lied. But what frightened everyone more was what followed. That same night, 23 Raoul fleets disappeared. Not destroyed, simply gone. No wreckage, no signals, Nothing but the faint pulse of Terran drives fading into the dark. The message was clear. Mercy had ended. By dawn, Raoul generals realized their fleets were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. The humans, the so-called Deathwalders, were moving. And this time, they weren't coming to talk. Smoke and dust rolled across the surface of Kareth 4, a barren outpost world deep within Raoul territory. The red sun cast long shadows across the ruins of a once proud garrison. The ground was littered with wrecked vehicles, shattered armor, and silence. Then, through the haze, came the humans. They moved in formation, slow, steady, and silent. Their black armor bore no flags, only the red cross glowing faintly on their shoulders. Helmets sealed, visors mirrored, they looked less like soldiers and more like predators in uniform. The Raoul survivors, trembling behind broken walls, watched in disbelief. The humans didn't cheer, didn't rage, didn't even speak. They simply moved from body to body, checking for life. When they found a wounded Raoul, they didn't shoot. They treated him. That was the most terrifying thing of all. In the shattered remains of a Raoul command post, Sergeant Callan Holt knelt beside a bleeding enemy soldier. The alien's scaled chest rose and fell weakly. The medic beside Holt whispered, "Sir, this one was firing at us 10 minutes ago." Holt didn't look up. "And now he's not. Patch him." The medic hesitated, then obeyed. When the Raoul soldier opened his eyes, confusion filled them. "Why? Help me," he rasped through broken teeth. Holt's voice was cold. "Because we're not monsters." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "But we become them when you make us." The Raoul soldier stared at him, unable to reply. Hours later, the battlefield was secured. Hundreds of Raoul prisoners sat bound but alive. Human medics moved among them, treating wounds and distributing water. The Raoul commander, a proud officer named Kel Vaughn, glared as he was brought before Sergeant Holt. "You think mercy makes you strong," he hissed. "You'll die for it." Holt looked at him for a long time, then leaned closer. "Mercy isn't weakness," he said quietly. "It's a warning." Vaughn spat on the ground. "We are Raoul. We are conquerors. You think this will scare us?" Holt stood, his voice low. "You'll see fear soon enough." Moments later, the roar of Terran engines filled the air. Dozens of dropships rose into the sky, leaving the ruined Raoul garrison behind. A field of silence where the humans had come, fought, healed, and vanished. The prisoners watched the ships disappear, a single question burning in every mind. What kind of enemy shows mercy like that? News of the ground battle spread across Raoul space. Reports from surviving soldiers told impossible stories, of humans who charged through fire without hesitation, of medics who saved the wounded from both sides, and of Marines who fought with terrifying precision. One captured Raoul officer said during interrogation, "They don't fight like soldiers. They fight like something older, something that remembers war too well." The phrase spread quickly among the Raoul ranks. They began to call the Terrans the ghosts of old Earth, creatures of instinct and rage wrapped in human form. Meanwhile, Admiral Mara Vance stood aboard the Resolution, watching a live feed of the battles below. Her expression never changed, cold, unreadable. Commander Hayes approached her carefully. "Ground teams report all enemy forces neutralized. Minimal human losses." "Good," Vance said quietly. "And the civilians?" "Untouched. Our medics are tending to them now." Vance nodded. "That's how we win. Not with fire, with control." She turned away from the screen, her reflection cast against the starlit window. "But make no mistake, Commander. If the Raoul want to see monsters, we'll show them what discipline looks like when it's angry." On Kareth Prime, panic spread through the Dominion's military networks. Entire battalions were refusing to engage the Terrans directly. Some even abandoned their posts. General Taka Vern paced inside the war chamber, his claws scraping the floor. "Our soldiers are afraid of humans." "Humans?" Commander Sira Thal, standing beside him, studied the latest battlefield reports. "They're not afraid of humans, General. They're afraid of what humans become when provoked." Taka hissed. "They bleed. They die. They can't be unstoppable. Syrah looked at him calmly. No, but they don't fight for conquest. They fight for principle. That's worse. The room fell silent. Meanwhile, in the Terran fleet's med bay, a small group of Raal prisoners lay recovering. One of them, a young lieutenant, stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic hum of the ship. A human nurse approached with a datapad. "You're lucky," she said softly. "You were one of only 12 survivors from your platoon." The Raal turned his head weakly. "Why keep me alive?" The nurse gave a faint smile. "Because that's who we are. We fix what others break." He frowned. "Then why destroy?" Her voice hardened. "Because you made us remember how." Later that night, as the fleet drifted in the dark between battles, Admiral Vance recorded a message to Earth Command. "Progress continues. Resistance is collapsing. Civilian casualties, 0. But I warn the Council, the Raal have not yet seen our full strength. They still think we fight out of anger. They are wrong. We fight out of duty." She paused, staring at the glowing red cross on her sleeve. "They called us monsters once. Maybe they were right. But monsters are what you send when mercy fails." She ended the recording. Down on Kareth 4, as dawn broke across the scorched plains, the remaining Raal prisoners watched the human dropships rise into the sky. The air shimmered with heat and smoke, but the red crosses painted on the ships burned bright, symbols of peace that now felt like warnings. One Raal whispered to another, voice trembling. "They don't fight for power. They fight for the dead." And far above, in the void between stars, the Terran fleet moved again, silent, relentless, and united under one unspoken truth. Mercy had a limit, and humanity had finally reached it. The galaxy had begun whispering. Every world, every station, every network carried the same quiet, fearful question: what are the humans really? No one knew how to answer. The humans had come into the galactic stage with peace banners and open hands. They built hospitals on the moons of strangers. They offered medicine even to old enemies. They spoke of unity, hope, and forgiveness. But now those same humans move through the stars like silent storms, precise, cold, and unstoppable. And everyone wanted to know, how could healers fight like that? In the great archives of the Solari Scholars Guild, far from the war, a historian named Tirath Vel opened an ancient Terran file. His hands shook as old holographic images flickered into life. Humans fighting each other, their cities burning, their skies filled with fire. He watched in silence as history unfolded. Wars upon wars, empires that rose and fell, weapons that could burn continents. Yet every time, the species rebuilt, stronger, smarter, harder. He whispered to himself, they didn't survive peace, they survived pain. Around him, alien scholars leaned closer, watching scenes of human soldiers dragging comrades through mud and fire, of medics treating the wounded under bombardment, of civilians rebuilding shattered worlds. A younger scholar gasped. They destroyed their own planet more than once, and still lived. Tirath nodded slowly. They did more than live. They learned. He stared at the last image, the red cross, painted on an ancient battlefield. That symbol of mercy, he said quietly, was born from blood. That's why they fight for it so fiercely now. Back in Raal space, fear had become a weapon. The Raal military began fracturing. Some commanders demanded total war. Others whispered of surrender. Civilians flooded the communication networks, begging their leaders to stop the fighting before the humans reached Kareth Prime itself. In the capital tower, Commander Sirathal stood before the Council of Generals. Her tone was calm, but her eyes burned. They are not fighting for revenge anymore, she said. They are fighting to prove who they are. General Taka Vern slammed his fist on the table. They are butchers. Every attack they make weakens our people. Syrah glared at him. And yet they spare your civilians. Why do you think that is? Taka hesitated. They want to show us mercy still exists, she continued, even when we don't deserve it. The chamber fell silent. The truth no one wanted to face was becoming clear. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were winning the galaxy's heart. Aboard the Resolution, Admiral Mara Vance stood in her ready room, staring at the ancient Earth flag hanging behind a desk. It was old, faded blue, torn at the edges, saved from a museum before the fleet departed. Commander Hayes entered quietly. The networks are spreading footage from old Earth wars again. Alien scholars are calling us Death Walders. Vance didn't look away from the flag. They are not wrong. Hayes hesitated. Is it true, Admiral, that humans nearly wiped themselves out again and again? Vance turned, her expression unreadable. Not nearly. We did. More than once. Civilizations rose, burned, rebuilt. Each time, we swore we'd be better. We learned medicine because we'd made too many widows. We built peace because we knew what chaos felt like. She took a deep breath. The Raal think mercy is weakness. They don't understand that it's the hardest thing we ever learned. Hayes nodded slowly. And now, she said, we remind them that mercy has a cost. That night, the fleet received intel. The Raal High Command was gathering its remaining forces on Kerith Prime, their homeworld. Massive energy readings signaled the construction of a planetary shield grid, a final stand. Admiral Vance gathered her officers. The briefing room dimmed, the holographic map of the Raal system glowing in the air. Our next target, she said, is Kerith Prime, the heart of the Dominion. A murmur ran through the officers. Everyone knew what that meant. Vance continued. This isn't conquest. This is closure. They will answer for the solace. But not by annihilation, by truth. Someone asked softly, and if they refuse? Vance looked across the table, her voice sharp as a blade. Then we show them the part of us history tried to forget. Far from the warfront, on the Terran colony of Luna Prime, a child watched the news on a public holoscreen. Images of the fleet filled the sky, the great black ships with red crosses glowing on their hulls. Mom, the child asked, are the humans the good guys or the bad guys now? The mother didn't answer for a long moment. She looked up at the ships and whispered, maybe we're both. Across the galaxy, the Raal propaganda machine collapsed. Leaked data revealed the truth of the Solace attack, deliberate, ordered, and celebrated by Raal generals. When those files hit the Galactic net, even Raal citizens turned against their leaders. Protests broke out across colonies. Signs appeared on Raal streets written in Terran script. Forgive us. But Earth wasn't listening anymore. The fleet had already set its course. On the bridge of the Resolution, as stars blurred into lines of light, Admiral Vance stood alone. The sound of the engines was steady, like a heartbeat. She whispered to herself, they think we're monsters. Then she looked at the photo on her console, the crew of the Solace, smiling, holding medical kits, unaware of their fate. Her jaw tightened. They'll learn what kind of monsters we become when compassion dies. And with that, the Terran fleet jumped toward Kerith Prime, carrying with it centuries of buried history, the rage of a species born from chaos, forged by pain, and now marching to deliver a lesson the galaxy would never forget. Mercy was a human invention, but so was war. The stars above Kerith Prime shimmered like dying embers. And then, one by one, they vanished, blotted out by the arrival of Earth's fleet. Hundreds of Terran warships slid from warp space in perfect formation. The lead vessel, TSS Resolution, cast a vast shadow over the Raal homeworld. Its hull bore no markings of conquest, only the glowing red cross, the mark of healers turned avengers. Across the planet, alarms screamed through the skies. Civilians ran to shelters. Military command centers went dark as jammers from orbit scrambled their systems. For the first time in centuries, the proud Raal Dominion faced silence from the stars. A message followed, calm, human, and merciless. This is Admiral Mara Vance of the Terran fleet. You attacked a medical ship. You murdered our doctors. You silenced the Solace. Today, we answer. High above the planet, Admiral Vance stood on the Resolution's bridge. Her officers moved quickly, voices steady but tense. Orbital defenses charging, said Commander Hayes. They're targeting the lead ships. Hold position, Vance ordered. Do not fire first. Let them make the mistake. Moments later, The Raoul's orbital batteries lit the night. Brilliant streams of plasma ripped upward, striking harmlessly against the human fleet's shields. "Return fire," Vance said coldly. The heavens opened. Human warships unleashed controlled fury. Plasma beams lanced across the void, targeting military sites, not cities. Entire defense platforms evaporated in seconds. A single volley destroyed the Raoul's outer fleet. On the surface, millions watched the sky burn. Deep underground, Commander Sirathal stood in the Raoul command bunker. She could feel the walls trembling with each distant impact. The room smelled of metal, fear, and failure. General Takavern barked orders at his staff, his voice cracking. "Deploy all fighters. Shield the capital. We must protect the council." Sira stepped forward. "General, you're ordering them to die for nothing. Look at the scans. The humans are not targeting civilians." He turned on her, rage in his eyes. "You would surrender? You would disgrace the Raoul." "I would save them," she shouted back. "Can't you see? They could have destroyed us already. They are showing restraint." Taka hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. Sira continued, her tone low and urgent. "They're sending a message. They want the council, not the people. If we keep fighting, we prove them right, that we're monsters." Above, the battle reached its crescendo. Human fighters danced through the atmosphere, striking only at weapon platforms and power grids. For every Raoul ship destroyed, another was left drifting, engines dead but crew alive. Inside the Resolution, Admiral Vance watched it all. "Targets neutralized," Hayes reported. "Their main fleet is gone. The planet's military grid is collapsing." Vance nodded slowly. "Then it's time." She opened a secure channel to the Raoul command frequency. Her voice filled every military channel across the planet. "People of Kareth Prime, we are not here to conquer you. We are here to end what your leaders began. The attack on our medical ship was an act of cowardice. Those responsible will stand trial. But we will not burn your world unless you force our hand." She paused. "You have 1 hour." The transmission ended. Silence followed. In the command bunker, the words echoed through the speakers. Sira stayed at the generals. None spoke. The truth was heavy, undeniable. Finally, she said quietly, 1 hour to decide whether Kareth Prime lives or dies. General Taka clenched his fists. His voice broke. "You think they'll stop with our leaders? They'll make us slaves." Sira looked at him with exhausted eyes. "No, they'll make us accountable." She drew her sidearm. The room froze. "Step away from the controls, General. I won't let you doom our world." Taka's soldiers hesitated. Then, one by one, they lowered their weapons. They knew the war was already lost. 58 minutes later, a transmission reached the Resolution. A single Raoul voice filled the speakers. "This is Commander Sirathal of the Raoul Dominion. The Council is dead. Their orders caused this war. I offer unconditional surrender." The bridge went silent. Admiral Vance closed her eyes. For a moment, her hand trembled, the first sign of emotion since the solace had fallen. "Accept it," she said softly. "Bring her aboard." An hour later, Sira stood on the Resolution's deck. Human soldiers flanked her, weapons holstered but ready. The Admiral approached slowly, her eyes sharp but not cruel. "You were the one who surrendered?" Vance asked. "Yes," Sira said quietly. "My people were deceived. The solace was celebrated as a victory. I didn't know the truth then. I do now." Vance studied her for a long moment. Then she said, "You ended this war before it consumed your world. That's more courage than your generals ever showed." Sira looked out the viewport, at the burning skies of Kareth Prime. "Will you destroy us anyway?" Vance shook her head. "No, we don't destroy the sick. We heal them. But first, they must understand what they've done." As the Raoul surrendered, the galaxy watched. Every broadcast carried the same haunting image: Terran ships hovering above Kareth Prime, their red crosses glowing against the blackness. No celebration, no cheering, just silence. And in that silence, the galaxy understood something new about Earth. Humanity didn't need to scream to be feared. They simply needed to act. That night, Admiral Vance stood alone on the observation deck. The war was over, but her heart was heavy. Commander Hayes approached. "The galaxy's calling us monsters again." Vance didn't turn. "Maybe they are right. Maybe we are." She watched the blue curve of Kerith Prime below them, fires still burning across its continents. "But we're monsters with a purpose.